Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to another edition of Court Call with Ronnie Nunn. We're going to focus on that crazy game last night between the Pacers and the Heat. So, Ronnie, this didn't appear to be a typical mid-March game between some random teams going at each other.
Yeah, this is a preempt to an Eastern Conference Finals, and you know the game is supposed to be like that. There is tension between the two teams because they both know they can beat each other, and they are already trying to get an upper mental level against each other on wins, on physicality, on play, and competition. They want to be more highly competitive than the other because it means something down the stretch when you go into those timeouts. You know you can beat a team, and I think that's what Indiana accomplished last night.
And the offshoot of it is it puts that much more pressure on the referees to be able to keep control of this game. And by the way, this might be the Eastern Conference Finals preview, but I can only imagine that if the Heat have to play the Bulls, it will be even worse because there's even more animosity between those teams. So I think what we're saying is we're going to have a really exciting Eastern Conference playoffs. Well, let's jump right into it, shall we? We have the first play we want to look at is LeBron James getting tripped by a referee, which is something that kind of happens. But tell us what the rule is about the referee on the floor and if you think his positioning was correct.
Yeah, you know, one of the things about a referee on the floor before we go anywhere is he's part of the floor. So whether the ball hits him or a player runs into him or he trips a player, in this case, it's all part of the game. So you can't like say, oh, blow the whistle. I'm sorry, that was my fault. I was in the way. It's all part of the game. And, you know, believe me, refs don't want to be involved in anything like that, especially on a play where you trip a guy. And thank goodness, the ball wasn't lost and his teammate was able to get it.
Should he be that far onto the court when he's in that position?
No, I like the fact that he wants to get up on top of the play, so to speak, because he knows the direction of which LeBron is going to take. I would rather see him get up sooner, and then if LeBron goes to a right, he can always go back down and follow that drive.
Well, let's look at a little bit later in the first quarter. We have a West steal of a LeBron James dribble, and the whistle kind of came out of nowhere. So walk us through how this happens and what you're supposed to be able to do to correctly have the game back on track.
I think what happened here, the official might have believed that this was a foul. Let's say it was on the forearm of a dribble, and he popped his whistle before he really saw the completion of it to make a decision. That's why really good officiating is never the whistle on the act. It's always a delay in making sure that you got it right. And so he whistled it quickly. The good news here is he recognized it. It was a play that should not have been interrupted, and he called it, which in our rules is an inadvertent whistle.
Although the obvious problem here is that it's a fast break, 2 points, probably for sure for Paul George, and you can't get that back.
No, Coach, you're right. That you can't get back, and you know that's part of that. That's part of life. Sometimes, you know, you can't deal with these games without the referees, without the refs. So yeah, it's part of a situation that occurs, and you can't get that back. Yeah, that is the downside of that.
Well, let's look on to the second quarter where we had Evan Turner guarding Dwayne Wade, and everybody was clamoring for a phantom call here, why they couldn't understand why there was a call. I suspect you might have some insight into why this was made and gave Dwayne Wade some free throws.
The concept is a shooter, whatever position he's in, whether he curls to the hoop on a post-up hook, whether he drives to the basket and finishes and comes down under the basket, or he shoots what we always see is the jumpers on the periphery. Well, a player must be able to land legally. And yes, this is a kind of phantom call. I should just say that the contact on the shooter, Wade, is very marginal by the hand. It's a tap. It has really no action on his ability to come down legally. But what Wade does is he employs a flop. He does employ a flop upon his return. And as soon as he gets touched, he recognizes that that leg can go, and I'm going to try to lure a whistle, and he does. You know, defensive players are the culprits in 90% of the plays. Cast your eyes on the defender, please. The old Darryl Garrettson axiom.
The referee that called it was on the left side of the floor, I believe, right? Not the right.
Yes.
And that's the other issue because the guy on the right side has the much clearer play.
By the way, these are some of the plays that I talk about where two sets of eyes on a play. That's the only play in town right now. So what two sets of eyes can get on it? Sure, the guy on the left of our screen and the guy on the bottom of our screen has got to look at that play. The guy that has the best look is certainly the guy on the bottom of the screen, and he does not whistle it. So, you know, you don't want to give a hunch and guess as the other official did. If he knows another guy's got a set of eyes on that play, you got to say, geez, it looks like something, but he doesn't have it. I'm going to pass on it too. Why? Because I'm not sure.
Right. Well, that's a problem because we'll get to another one of those, maybe not sure in a minute. But let's look at in the third quarter, the double tech between Dwayne Wade and Lance Stevenson. You know, Lance, we've talked about a little bit on the show. What are you thinking? Was this an appropriate use of the referee's double technical call?
You know, it is. And I think the issue was really that before the ball had gone out of bounds, and credit the official, I mean, he really's got to see where this ball is going. So he's got his eyes off Stevenson and Chalmers. But the official up on the same side of that court has got to see that something went on between Stevenson and Chalmers as they grabbed each other, or one initiated the grab. And that makes this play maybe a loose ball foul. It also may make the play a double foul. But the problem was Lance really goes at Chalmers, and then Wade comes in to protect his guy. And that's where the more obvious thing came in, where it looked like, again, Lance Stevenson being, you know, it's not proactive, it's being unnecessarily aggressive. And all of a sudden, Wade gets into it, and they give the text to the proper people.
I agree. And listen, the way I see it is he grabbed Chalmers because Chalmers clearly wanted to go to the baseline for the loose ball, so he wasn't going to be holding his hand for any other reason. I also think that, yeah, the motion of him stepping up to Chalmers in a game like this certainly would merit, but they didn't call the T there. That would have diffused the situation. To me, it was almost like it was two separate technical fouls. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was kind of you know, Stevenson was suspect. No, there's no question on his stepping into Chalmers' space. I mean, he went towards him. So if someone picked that up, that was a good move. The other is Wade made the whole incident much more obvious, and now it put Stevenson in a no-win situation because he had made some first steps, maybe not towards Wade, but he had done something already. So it would have been really nice to have a whistle on that play. And then, you know, at least Stevenson could have got involved with the refs and not another player.
Absolutely. Well, either way, I think he was doomed to get a technical foul on that play, and it'll come back to haunt him in a little bit. But let's first go to the LeBron drive on Hibbert and the elbow to the face area, which became pretty severe. I don't know if you saw the reaction of Hibbert falling down again afterwards, which becomes important the way you interpret this call.
Yeah, there was no question that on this play, this drive to the basket was a very shrewd way of extending your space against the defender. And what he does is he widens his body by the use of his elbows. And so he doesn't throw the elbow, basically. He widens it so it will make space for him for any part of that body of Hibbert to be in. And because of that, he catches Hibbert in a really bad place. Now, the officials immediately see this as a regular foul. The other certainly recognizes that the elbow gets to the chin or somewhere on the side of the cheek of that face. So he calls an offensive foul, which we do have offensive fouls on elbows going to the head in this kind of manner, because they're not the type that are launched directly at somebody, you know, that twist or that turn that's seeking out somebody. It's kind of in the motion. It is very shrewd, but it is in the motion. As they recognize that Hibbert's down, there's a stop and play. They also recognize that this is worthy of a look and to the camera. Normally, you don't go to the cameras for regular fouls, but in a case where this widens open into something other, they feel something else may have happened, they went, and as a result, they upgraded it to a flagrant 1. But I would tell you that if he swung towards him to seek him out, he would have been ejected.
Interesting. Okay, because I do feel like he did swing toward him to punish him. He's probably tired of having this verticality rule enforced against him, and Hibbert's been very successful with it.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I like LeBron James. I think he's the best player on the planet. And I hate to ever sort of cast aspersions about somebody like that, but I don't know. It just seems to me that that wasn't a real as natural a basketball play as you would normally see. Really quickly, we did have a question of whether or not LeBron traveled on this move, on the baseline move. I guess the one question is that gather step after the dribble considered the one? And then he goes off of both feet, but it's also a split both feet, so it really almost looks like a 1-2, 3 steps. What do you think, Ronnie?
He does take 3 steps because his gather is really on his right foot. It's not like the gather that's very difficult to see when you're on a dribble gather, but he catches, and so it becomes very obvious he takes 3 steps. And by the way, had they called a walk, they could have still called a flagrant.
Wow. Okay. Hey, another one of those great things we don't always hear about or know. Well, absolutely. Let's move on to our next play, which is a Dwayne Wade corner 3 that was crucial in this game, and it was a really impressive shot. They called it out of bounds, but on the replay, we realized that it wasn't out of bounds. Ronnie, tell us a little bit about the positioning of the referee and whether or not that was if he should have been able to make the call he made.
Well, you know what? Referees that begin to get the steps towards becoming playoff referees have to realize that the I's have to be dotted and the T's are crossed. And the reason why this official misses this play is because he doesn't go out there and confirm that this foot is truly on the line. And obviously, it's a heel that's up, and it's missed. And by the way, again, if you're where the camera is as the other official, just in case you're giving a hand, you also don't have a whistle. Now, he may not be totally sure because it's a distance. Don't forget that camera is really focusing on those 2 guys, the line and the foot. But, you know, you have to take care of your own business, and that business is on the lead official that's on that baseline. He's got to go and join those 2 guys and make sure that Wade's foot, as close as it is not on the line, and or is on the line, whichever he thinks. And I think he believed it just was on it, but his body to see it is unclear. He can't confirm that.
The sideline referee clearly should have been able to see that it wasn't. I mean, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, but these guys are, you know, good eyes. So I guess is the only reason why he didn't jump in there to change this was because he assumed, oh, it must have been on the baseline side where he stepped out?
No, well, it could be. You know, an out-of-bounds play can be overturned. That's one of those plays where you can go to your partner and say, are you sure this player was out of bounds? I mean, where was he out of bounds at to you? And to your point, he said, well, I got him on the baseline. His toe is on the baseline. I said, okay, great. Keep with your call. See you down court. But he says, no, I have him on the sideline. Then the official could say, well, can I offer you help on this? And he said, go ahead. Yes, his heel was up. The play is good. We could change that play and score that goal for 3.
Well, let's move on to our next call here, which is actually Lance Stevenson getting an ejection for taunting. Is there any interpretation here, or was it clear, cut and dried, black and white, he's got to go?
You know, the problem was he already had something going on, and he already had something going on with guess who? The same guy he murmured something to. Now, I think Jeff Van Gundy had an interesting point, and he was talking about the egregiousness of this act. And he felt that it was really very, very minimal, that the officials should not have attended to it. But these are the things, if you start widening the gap on emotional play and emotional talk, it begins to create a different level of physicality and energy against each other as opponents. So first of all, the technical foul was correct, because I don't think the look was as bad as him opening his mouth. That's where he got in trouble. And by the way, let me just say, ball players forever talk smack to each other during the game, and they you know, we got some great players in their day to talk to each other, but they don't talk directly at each other. They talk in passing, or they say something. And I've also had situations where they say, "Excuse me, are you talking to him?" I said, "No, I'm talking to myself," because I can't really tell. But I know somebody got the word, and of course the opponent says to me, "No, Ronnie, he's talking to me." I said, "Well, I'm going to be watching, see who's talking to who." So the bottom line is they always have a little something to say, just like we say out from the years when they started. You can't check me, you can't stop me, Yeah, you put it on the ground, I'll steal it from you. Whatever the guys want to talk about, it always happens in the game. But you can't make it displayed or demonstrative like this, especially when there's a rule for taunting.
Yeah. I also feel like Chalmers tried to trip him when he's getting up. You can see him look behind him and then step a little bit wider than what would be natural. And that's, by the way, that's all that stuff you're talking about. You know,
Yes.
nothing in the face, whatever, a little this, a little that. That's all great stuff. So you think that if Lance had gotten away with just not opening his mouth, a little quick stare, he might have gotten, that might have been a little bit of the leeway he would have gotten?
Yeah, I think the little stare was quick. As a matter of fact, if you watch Wade, he gets it because Wade smiles. And then all of a sudden he must hear to his right, the coach is saying, oh, I mean, that's a taunt. That's a taunt. The players are yelling, that's a taunt. Now all of a sudden he looks serious. But before he smiled because he gets it. The problem is that Stevenson gave himself away. And that you don't have to do. The players get it when they're going at each other. These are athletes. They appreciate competition. But when you make it a notable act, I'm glad the league has talked about taunting because we've also seen that if it's not put in check, it creates problems for the game, and all of a sudden you get a game back in another era.
So it's built in. They give him a pass. He gets that one in the beginning, which he already unfortunately used
Right.
for the same thing. So, you could take the kid out of Brooklyn, I guess, but you can't take the Brooklyn out of the kid, apparently.
Yeah, that probably works for me too. There's somewhere along the line I've got that DNA also, but I've had it controlled. You certainly get a good lesson on having your DNA controlled if you have these emotions if you referee.
Yeah,
you really have to be under control during conflict.
If only he had watched our core call from earlier this season, maybe he would have known. So maybe we'll get him on board. Let's move on to our last clip, which is very interesting because it was a very exciting shot, and in real time, I didn't have any clue what was going on until I looked at it closely. But David West has a crucial three, pretty much the game, game-saving three here. 50 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and we got some fancy footwork happening here. So, Ronnie, how do you see this play unfolding?
First, I should tell you that technically it is a travel. David West already establishes a left foot on his catch. But when you're in a game like this, and I'm speaking for myself or any of our officials have reached the top, this is kind of close. And when it's that close, you don't come in microscope something that, you really can't say for sure. You got to have it really down. It's kind of like a rhythm catch. It's so close to being 2 feet down. You don't take away from a game on something that is not really discriminatory for your, that you can see. The ability to discern is the word I'm looking for. This particular act, it's too tight. But technically, it is a switch of pivot feet, and it could be called a travel.
Okay, I mean, interesting because there's another one of those opportunities where, okay, it's crucial. They don't want to call it. They don't want to make the game, get involved with the game when let the players decide. But then they don't do the same kind of thing with, like, the Lance Stevenson ejection. Totally different plays, apples and oranges. But if I were a ref, I would have been happy to see that call and make it because there is no interpretation in my mind there. That was a switch to pivot foot, and let's go on down.
Well, if you're allowing this type of action, pretty much this very minor action occurring in games throughout the season, it is very hard to all of a sudden critique this play so significantly at this time in the season. So it's all fair that behaviors of this type are not going to be as focused, although I think the traveling has been a greater focus throughout the past decade, really. The 5 years I was there with it and beyond, and also with the guys dealing with it now. But this is a tight one, and you've got to be sure. And if you think you have to go to this, then the league has got to put this out and say, we're going to this as well. So it's a step-by-step process to get traveling back where it's legitimate, so all our traditionalists can feel, okay, the game is back where it should be or something.
Okay, well, we're getting a little metaphysical here about life and what rules mean and what they don't mean, and you never know what's going to happen on this show when we get through some of these calls. So, Ronnie, great insights. I cannot wait for this series, and hopefully the Bulls don't get involved in knocking one of these guys off. And but then again, that will be a pretty good one too, and maybe even harder on the referees.
Well, I know you're a Chicago man, and the Bulls earned their right to be feared, and I think they're missing a couple of people maybe in key spots to really be at this level. But they are good enough to beat these teams, and they have a mentality that puts fear in both of these teams, even though their skill set may be a little, and their level of the ability of the players are a tad below this line of these particular guys out here. But they can win. They have a way of winning, and they've got very fervent players from the coach right on through the last guy.
Terrific. Well, you know what? I'm in, and I can't wait. Thanks for coming on the show to break these things down. And don't forget, sportsmans, tweet us your suggestions. Use the hashtag court call, date, time, teams, what quarter, and we'll get right to it as soon as we can. And don't forget, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel. We're a conversation. You in?
I'm in, Coach. Glad to be here with you as always.